Hello world, welcome from the African American History Museum. Will Sullivan helping run the demo for OMB eRegs. Actually, technically on my day off, but we're going to rock and roll here anyways. And, whoop, I'm going to mute too early. This is our bi-weekly sprint demo showing the work that we've completed on the OMB eRegs Policy Library project. And we will jump right into the demo. If you want to watch previous videos of all of our work, you can check the playlist of this YouTube video. You can share this link and watch it on replay as you'd like at your leisure. And with that, we will get started, and I will toss to Theo.
Thanks, Will. So I'm going to share my screen and talk about the document editor. As you all are aware, we've been working on this What You See is What You Get document editor. Before we made it accessible to admins, we needed to polish it a bit. So for example, around permissions, we needed to make sure that not only were admins the only ones who could save these documents, we wanted to ensure that admins could also access all of the documents. So notably, we have a checkbox in the policy admin that says whether a document is public or not. And we need to make sure that we're doing all the permissions checks to allow admins to modify non-public documents. That's how they make them public. We also needed to make sure that every time a document is loaded and then saved, that the result is almost identical. We wouldn't, it would be a real bad state if when someone goes to an editor and then saves a document not changing anything, they actually lost data. So we had to do some things like ensure that these headers are tagged correctly so that in the outputting document, we have our table of contents. We had to go through and ensure all of our inline entities, like this is an inline citation, that we're not losing any data, even if we haven't implemented a feature. Like here we haven't implemented inline citations, so they're not displayed in their superscript form. Even though we haven't modified, we don't have them visible yet, we still need to ensure that that data is preserved. So editors can go ahead and start modifying the text without worrying about creating a broken document on the other side. In terms of display, we've worked on bringing over system fonts. These are fonts that look decent across your operating system. And so we're using them. So these are the same fonts that we're using in the user interface. We're now using them in the editor. Previously, this was all, I think, Times New Roman. So we're trying to keep consistency between the editor and the front end. We've also added the ability to view lists, view and edit lists, including nested lists, like at the bottom of M1619. So that's, we can edit all of these elements, and we're going to add more and more elements. Like we still need to add footnotes and tables and things like that. But we've also added the ability to create some new types of content. Previously, you could edit, but you couldn't create new entities. Notably, we've added the ability to add a paragraph. Let me get to a good spot for a paragraph. Up here. So you'll notice that this paragraph was added after the footnote. Similarly, if there was a list, it would add after the list. And that's because we want to keep the paragraphs at conceptually the same level. And so since we were at this level within the hierarchy, the footnote is kind of inside this paragraph. So we skip over it to add the paragraph down here. If we can add paragraphs, we need to be able to delete paragraphs. And yeah, so we can add paragraphs, we can delete paragraphs, and we now have the ability to actually save these documents. I'm going to reload since I don't want to overwrite anything potentially bad there. But if I were to change, for example, this parenthesis, I could save the document, and it will give me a notification that it's been saved. I'm going to revert that. We also added a transition between this viewer, this editor, and the XML editor that Tig's going to talk about. So we need to be able to save the content before we can deserialize it on the other side. So clicking Save then XML actually save the document, and then when that's done, redirect you over to the AKN editor. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Tig.
Thanks, CM. I think you're still, okay, there we go. I'm presenting. So I'm going to talk about the XML editor, as CM said. I'll note that I'm presenting work that was mostly done by Atul, who can't join us for this meeting today. So this is mostly the result of his efforts. The biggest thing is that the editor code for the XML editor is now close to production ready, whereas the last time we showed it, it was merely a prototype. Things that are most visible is that the error messages are much improved. So I'm going to demo that live. This is the same view that the Save Then XML button that CM clicked brings us to. And this is the same document in XML, specifically the Akoma Ntoso flavor of XML. And this is where you can edit the elements that are not yet editable in the WYSIWYG editor, such as footnotes. There's a footnote here, ID and content. And so the WYSIWYG editor can't edit that yet. But if we wanted to edit it here, we can enter text, change things, and save them, which I'm also not going to do because I don't want to mess up this particular document. Atul did a lot on error reporting, some of which isn't visible here because it's visible from the import step. But one example is for footnotes. Each footnote is identified by an emblem. And now we cannot have two footnotes with the same emblem. I'm going to try to save here. And we get an error, not just an error, but a fairly meaningful error. It tells us that we have to look at the multiple footnotes and figure out where an emblem ID has been repeated. So we'll save that. We'll save correctly. This also allows us to know when more basic XML errors are in our edit, such as if I delete that. It will tell me exactly where the missing greater than sign here is for the content element. And if I delete this, it will complain about the lack of a closing tag, which I will now add back in. So that was most of what Atul worked on. Validation errors are more detailed and accurate. We cover footnote validation and check for duplicate emblems. And that's it for this demo. I will pass it back to Will.
Cool. And next is Ryan, talking about admin interface changes.
Whoa, infinite. All right, so as we are honing in on the editor, we wanted to adjust the Django interface to meet the needs of our users. This is kind of the, this is where we started with Django. It is a list of things, of all the policies. It is searchable, DCOI. There we go, DCOI. And if we click on M1619, we see the preamble, which this is also kind of the default Django. And in terms of content, I believe this is residual cruft questionnaire form fields here. So when we went through this and we wanted to kind of amend some of the styling and kind of bringing a little more in line to what we were doing. So here's the same thing. We've got columns now where we can start adding, you know, a sortable list of, you know, when was it published? Who was the last person that, when was it last edited? What is the status of that kind of thing? We have this nice filter list on the side where we can build that out to kind of meet our needs. We also eliminated back here, if you look, let me go back one. There's this action here. We don't really anticipate, at least not for MVP, a need for any bulk actions at this point. So for now, we just kind of took that out. And I can do the same thing. Let's search for DCOI. And here we go, same document. And in terms of that preamble, is much shorter. The fields are longer, so like as we all know, these policies kind of have some verbose titles. So we made the form fields wider, and we also stacked. It's kind of a form field kind of form best practices to not do the left and right. It's to stack vertically all of the form labels with their accompanying fields. Helper text for things. If I don't want to edit this, but you know, what is optional is a little bit clearer, where you can see what happens actually. Let's see how smart CM was. Not smart enough. Damn it. But anyway, this will be a optional if it is. I think it's not optional right now because it was already filled out. But so that was a big thing. And then we get the nice wider form fields, which I think I already mentioned. And then just stylistically, we've got a little bit more clarity on the visual hierarchy of things, you know, in terms of what you're doing here and where you are. I know in future iterations of this, you're going to kind of perfect this breadcrumb trail if it's even necessary. And then the last thing I wanted to share, is how do I get it to show? Here we go. Me, just because I want her immortalized on the internet. Can you see me? Can anyone see me? Everyone's muted.
Yes.
Here's my cat, June. Boom. That is all. And I believe Austin will be taking the reins next.
Yep. Hey, so I am doing screen share to talk about the last piece, which is what we're doing with the WYSIWYG updates. So all related to the development work and what Ryan was just speaking about, we have the ways that the actual text editor will look. You saw CM's demo and the XML demo that Tyke did. It has like a monospace font or like that pink bar to show that there's a footnote there. So we did two different directions. One direction Ryan worked on, I don't know how well y'all can see this, but it is a full screen view. Let me see. So this is a way that we were thinking about doing the editor, which was more in sections to help with XML. We just got Cordelia on the team as a content designer, but she's been really great in helping us with one of the gaps that was missing, which was a technical expertise of a developer with design and content sensibilities. So she kind of bridges the gap between the technical and the design team, which has been super useful. And so she was talking to us about if the long-term goal of this editor is to help with shaping policy as an archive, that the semantic markup needs to be as accurate as possible. So she was kind of talking through what we were thinking of a traditional WYSIWYG text editor and encouraging us to imagine it as if we were doing more structured content writing. This also gets into a bigger product vision of what are the tasks that what are the metrics that we want to measure this against? Is it time to complete tasks? Is it the semantic markup? So we have this other version, which is the WYSIWYG version. In our initial user interviews, we talked about our users' familiarity and competency in Word, Google, and other processing documents. That seems to be where our users are spending the bulk of their time. So I wanted to duplicate that interface as closely as possible. I also had the hypothesis that a simple-looking interface would be easier to adopt when we go to other agencies and ask people to use this. We didn't want the interface to look so cumbersome for editing purposes. So this is one of the benefits of this WYSIWYG editor versus a monospace font parsed out sectionable editor. We also are finalizing and stripping out the controls. So as you saw in CM's demo, there's like bare bones kind of type at the top. It's like an undo, redo, and like little buttons there. But this is to make sure that there's consistencies within the data. There's only 3 font styles that you can have. There's an unordered list, an ordered list, links, footer, indent, outdent, redo, undo, and then a save button. And then there's the edit XML, which Tig was showing in his demo, which will take you to another, which will save and take you to another page where you can edit the XML. So these are being called final features for what we are anticipating for MVP for needs of formatting the document. It's just kind of combining these two to make sure that the markup is as semantic and XML compliant, I guess, as possible. So we are exploring how to combine these two designs, something that looks easy with the familiarity of Word, but also make sure that things are structured in a way that they are easily findable and archivable. So one of the things that we're working on right now, as you saw on CM's demo, there is the preamble information, which we've finalized as well, of the information that needs to be recorded in the document. And it goes to the editor itself is on another page. So right now we have like what's a full page design and how we can combine those two like chunked out text and defining what each section is, like a header or a paragraph or a footnote, and making sure that they are easily, making sure that it's easily editable, looks easy to edit, and has all the only text styles that are relevant that would make the code look nice and pretty in future archival efforts. So this is something that we are exploring now. I have a bit of a sketch demo of ways that we could separate out and reduce the amount of information that's our controls that we have at the top, and being able to separate this text as in different chunks, content chunks. And then there's a save button and an edit XML button as well. Then there's the need for an indent, outdent, and the undo, redo, and all that stuff. So this is kind of one of the directions that we're going, that we need to validate. Would this deviate too much for a user's competency in a WYSIWYG editor? Will the data that comes out of it be nice and pretty? And I think that's it for what we have done on the WYSIWYG editor. And with that, I will return. Oh, stop sharing. And I think it's back to Will.
Yep. And that's going to include the work that we're showing in this demo. Our next demo will be in 2 weeks, next Friday on, or in 2 Fridays on the 16th. Our next portion of this presentation will be our fun call-in section, where we open a conference line and everybody calls in and chats about what they saw, asks questions, provides feedback and such. So you can go ahead and close this YouTube live stream. You come back and reference it in the future if you need to. But just call into that number, the 719-325-8255, 2013, and then enter in the conference number. We'll all be on the line and we'll chat it up. Thank you, and see you on the internet.